The coffee shop on Fifth Avenue was busier than usual that Tuesday morning. Rachel Morgan wiped down the espresso machine for the third time, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, while her mind wandered to the interview scheduled for 2 o'clock. After 5 years of working double shifts between this cafe and her night job at the diner, she finally had a shot at something better, an administrative assistant position at Sterling Industries, one of the most prestigious companies in Manhattan. The pay would change everything. No more choosing between rent and groceries. No more sleeping 4 hours a night. "Rachel, table 7 needs clearing," her manager shouted from behind the counter. She grabbed a tray and headed toward the window seats, her worn sneakers squeaking against the tile floor. The early autumn sun streamed through the glass, and she allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe today would be the day her luck finally turned around. She'd spent the entire previous week preparing for the interview, researching the company, practicing answers to potential questions in front of her bathroom mirror. Sterling Industries wasn't just any corporation. It was an empire built on innovation and excellence, and being part of it would open doors she'd only dreamed about. As Rachel balanced the tray of dirty dishes, she heard a commotion outside. Through the window, she saw a young girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old, standing on the curb. The child wore an expensive-looking school uniform, navy blazer, plaid skirt, polished shoes, but her face was streaked with tears. She clutched a small backpack to her chest and looked around frantically, clearly lost and terrified. Rachel glanced at the clock. She had exactly 45 minutes before she needed to leave for her interview. The subway ride alone would take 30 minutes, and she still needed to go home and change into the only professional outfit she owned. But the little girl outside was crying harder now, and people were walking past her without a second glance, too absorbed in their own lives to notice a child in distress. Setting down the tray, Rachel pushed through the cafe door and approached the girl. "Hey there, sweetie. Are you okay? Are you lost?" The child looked up at her with wide, frightened blue eyes. "I can't find my driver," she sobbed. "He was supposed to pick me up from school, but he wasn't there. I tried to walk to my dad's office, but I don't know which way to go. I can't remember the address." Rachel knelt down to the girl's level, her heart aching at the terror in those young eyes. She recognized the signs of genuine panic. The rapid breathing, the trembling hands. "It's going to be all right." "What's your name?" "Sophie," the girl whispered. "I'm Rachel. Listen, Sophie, we're going to figure this out together, okay? Do you know your dad's phone number?" Sophie nodded and recited a number, which Rachel immediately dialed on her cell phone. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Looking at the girl's pale face, Rachel made a decision that would alter the course of her life, though she couldn't know it then. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. Do you know where your dad works? The name of the building?" "Sterling Tower," Sophie said. "The big one with the glass." Rachel's stomach dropped. Sterling Industries, the same company where she had an interview in less than an hour. The building was 15 blocks away. Walkable, but it would take time she didn't have. She looked down at Sophie's tear-stained face and made her choice. "I know exactly where that is. I'm going to take you there myself, okay? We'll get you safe to your dad." Sophie's face flooded with relief, and she grabbed Rachel's hand. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Rachel ducked back into the cafe just long enough to grab her purse and tell her manager she had an emergency. He started to protest, but she was already out the door, Sophie's small hand clasped firmly in hers. They walked quickly through the crowded sidewalks, Rachel keeping up a steady stream of conversation to keep the girl calm. "So, you go to Ashford Academy?" Rachel asked, recognizing the uniform's distinctive crest. "Yes, it's my first year there. We just moved back to New York last month. Everything's still new and scary. I bet. Moving to a new place is hard. But you're very brave, Sophie." As they walked, Rachel kept trying the phone number, but it continued going to voicemail. She left 3 messages, each one more urgent than the last, explaining the situation and that she was bringing Sophie to Sterling Tower. The minutes ticked by relentlessly. Her interview was at 2 o'clock sharp. It was now 1:30, and they were still 8 blocks away. Sophie talked nervously as they walked, explaining how she'd gotten separated from her usual driver. Apparently, There had been some confusion about the pickup schedule, and she'd waited at the school entrance for nearly an hour before deciding to try to find her way to her father's office on her own. "Dad's been so busy since we moved back," she said quietly. "He works all the time. I didn't want to bother him, but I got scared." Rachel's heart broke a little. She knew what it was like to feel alone in a big city. You did the right thing asking for help. And your dad will be so relieved to see you safe. They finally reached Sterling Tower at 1:55. The building soared into the sky, all gleaming glass and steel, a monument to success and power. Rachel's hands were sweating, and not just from the brisk walk. She was supposed to be here for her interview in 5 minutes, dressed professionally and composed. Instead, she was in her coffee-stained work clothes, out of breath, with a lost child in tow. The lobby was vast and intimidating, with marble floors and a ceiling that seemed impossibly high. Security guards stood at attention near the elevators, and well-dressed business people moved with purpose through the space. Rachel approached the reception desk, Sophie still holding her hand. "Hi, I need help," Rachel said to the woman behind the desk. "This is Sophie. She got lost trying to find her father who works here. We've been trying to call him, but—" "Sophie Sterling?" The receptionist's eyes widened, and she immediately picked up her phone. "Mr. Sterling's daughter? Oh my God. Yes, we need security to the top floor immediately." Rachel's brain stuttered over the name. Sterling. As in the Sterling of Sterling Industries. This little girl wasn't just an employee's daughter. She was the daughter of Christopher Sterling, the billionaire CEO whose face graced the cover of Forbes and Business Weekly. The man who had built a technology and investment empire from nothing, who was known for his brilliant mind and ruthless business acumen. Before Rachel could fully process this information, the elevator doors opened and a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit strode out, his face a mixture of terror and relief. He was younger than Rachel expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples and intense blue eyes. The same eyes as Sophie. "Sophie!" He crossed the lobby in seconds and dropped to his knees, pulling the girl into his arms. "Thank God. Thank God you're safe. I've been losing my mind. The school called, and Marcus said there was confusion with the schedule. And when I couldn't reach you, I'm sorry, Daddy." Sophie sobbed into his shoulder. "I got scared and tried to find you, but I got lost. But this lady helped me. She brought me here." Christopher Sterling looked up at Rachel for the first time, and she felt the full weight of his attention. His eyes scanned her face, then her coffee-stained uniform, taking in every detail. "You brought her here?" "Yes, sir. I found her outside my work, and she was upset. She mentioned Sterling Tower, and I wanted to make sure she got home safely." He stood, one hand still on Sophie's shoulder, and extended his other hand to Rachel. "Christopher Sterling, I cannot thank you enough. In a city where most people would have walked past, you stopped to help. You kept her safe. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion beneath his composed exterior. "I'm in your debt." Rachel shook his hand, acutely aware of how rough her own hands must feel against his. "I'm just glad she's okay. Any parent would have been terrified." "What's your name?" "Rachel Morgan." He studied her for another moment, and Rachel saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity. But before he could speak, her phone alarm went off. 2:00, her interview. Rachel's heart sank as she realized what she'd done. She'd sacrificed her one chance at a better life for a child she didn't know. The interview she'd prepared for, dreamed about, needed so desperately. It was starting right now, and she was standing in the lobby in her work clothes instead of sitting in the HR office on the 15th floor. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I need to go. I'm just really glad Sophie is safe." She turned toward the door, blinking back tears of frustration and exhaustion. "Wait," Christopher called after her. "Where are you going?" Rachel paused but didn't turn around. "I had an interview here today, at 2:00, for an administrative assistant position. But I'm obviously late now, and I look—" She gestured at her stained uniform. "It doesn't matter. Sophie needed help, and that was more important." The lobby was silent except for the sound of Rachel's footsteps as she walked toward the exit. She'd made her choice, and she'd make it again. But that didn't stop the tears from finally spilling over as she pushed through the glass doors and stepped back into the crowded street, leaving behind both the little girl she'd saved and the future she'd lost. Rachel made it 3 blocks before she had to stop. She leaned against a brick wall, pressing her palms against the rough surface as the tears came harder. 5 years. 5 years of scraped-together savings. Night classes at community college. Endless job applications. And the one real opportunity she'd gotten. She'd thrown away in the span of an hour. She knew she'd done the right thing. Sophie's frightened face would haunt her forever if she'd simply walked past. But knowing she'd made the right choice didn't pay her rent. It didn't erase the student loans or fix her father's mounting medical bills back in Ohio. It didn't change the fact that she'd probably never get another shot at a company like Sterling Industries. Her phone buzzed. A text from her manager at the cafe. "Don't bother coming back. Walking out during rush is unacceptable." Rachel laughed bitterly. Of course. She'd lost both her interview and her job in one afternoon. She texted back a simple resignation and started the long walk home to her studio apartment in Queens. She couldn't afford the subway fare anymore, not if she wanted to eat dinner. The next morning, Rachel updated her resume and started applying to every position she could find. Restaurants, retail stores, office temp agencies. Anything that would keep her afloat while she figured out her next move. By noon, she'd sent out 47 applications and received 3 automated rejection emails. She was eating a sad lunch of rice and canned vegetables when her phone rang from an unknown number. "Is this Rachel Morgan?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "This is Jennifer Hartwell from Sterling Industries Human Resources. I'm calling about yesterday's missed interview." Rachel's stomach twisted. "I'm so sorry about that. There was an emergency and We'd like to reschedule," Jennifer interrupted. "Would you be available to come in tomorrow at 10? Rachel sat up straighter, nearly knocking over her water glass. "Tomorrow? Yes, absolutely. I'll be there." "Excellent. Ask for me at the reception desk. Have a good day, Ms. Morgan." The call ended before Rachel could ask any questions. She stared at her phone in disbelief. They were giving her another chance. Maybe someone had noticed she'd been with Sophie. Maybe they understood. Whatever the reason, she wasn't going to waste this opportunity. She spent the evening preparing even more meticulously than before. She pressed her suit, polished her shoes until they gleamed, printed extra copies of her resume on expensive paper she'd been saving. She rehearsed answers until she could recite them in her sleep. This time, nothing would stop her from making it to that interview. The next morning, Rachel arrived at Sterling Tower 45 minutes early. She checked her appearance in the lobby bathroom 3 times, making sure every hair was in place, every button properly fastened. At 9:55, she approached the reception desk. "I'm Rachel Morgan. I have an appointment with Jennifer Hartwell." The receptionist smiled warmly, the same woman from 2 days ago. "Of course, Ms. Morgan. Take the elevator to the 15th floor. Someone will meet you there." Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she pressed the button. The elevator was sleek and quiet, rising smoothly through the building. When the doors opened, a woman in a tailored pantsuit was waiting. "Rachel, I'm Jennifer Hartwell. Thank you for coming." She shook Rachel's hand and gestured down a hallway. "Please, follow me." They walked past rows of offices and cubicles, everyone busy with important work. Rachel tried to imagine herself here, being part of something meaningful. Jennifer led her to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Have a seat. Can I get you water? Coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you." Jennifer returned with 2 bottles of water and sat across from Rachel. But instead of pulling out interview questions, she folded her hands and looked at Rachel with an expression that was hard to read. "Ms. Morgan, I'm going to be direct with you. The position you applied for has been filled." Rachel's heart plummeted. "Oh, I see. Then why did you ask me to come in?" "Because Mr. Sterling would like to meet with you personally. He asked me to bring you up to his office after we spoke." "Mr. Sterling? Christopher Sterling?" "Yes. He was very insistent." Jennifer stood. "If you're comfortable with that, please come with me." Rachel followed in a daze as they took another elevator, this one requiring a key card, up to the top floor. The executive level was hushed and elegant, with thick carpeting and original artwork on the walls. Jennifer led her to a pair of massive wooden doors and knocked softly. "Come in," a familiar voice called. The office was stunning. Huge windows, modern furniture, shelves lined with books and awards, and behind an enormous desk sat Christopher Sterling, looking just as composed and intimidating as he had in the lobby 2 days ago. He stood when Rachel entered. "Ms. Morgan, thank you for coming." "Please, sit." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Jennifer, that will be all. Thank you." After Jennifer left, Christopher sat back down and studied Rachel for a long moment. She fought the urge to fidget under his intense gaze. "I've been thinking about you," he said finally. "About what you did for Sophie. Do you know how rare that is? In this city. In this world. Genuine kindness without expectation of reward." "I just did what anyone should do," Rachel said quietly. She was a scared little girl, but not everyone would have. He leaned forward. "I had my assistant do some research. You've been working 2 jobs for 5 years while taking night classes. You're putting yourself through school. You send money home to help with your father's medical expenses. You missed your interview here because you chose to help my daughter instead of advancing your own career." Rachel's cheeks flushed. "I didn't know she was your daughter." "Exactly. That's what makes it meaningful." He opened a folder on his desk. "The administrative assistant position was filled, as Jennifer told you. But I'd like to offer you something different. A position as my executive assistant." Rachel was sure she'd misheard. "Your executive assistant? The role requires intelligence, discretion, excellent judgment, and genuine character. You've demonstrated all of those qualities. The salary is $120,000 annually, plus benefits and bonuses. You'd work directly with me, managing my schedule, handling confidential matters, interfacing with clients and board members." The number echoed in Rachel's head. $120,000. That was more than she'd made in the past 3 years combined. "Mr. Sterling, I'm incredibly grateful, but I don't have experience." "You have the qualities I can't teach," he interrupted. "Skills can be learned, integrity cannot. I've built this company by trusting my instincts about people, and my instincts tell me you're exactly who I need on my team." Rachel's mind raced. This was too good to be true. People didn't get offers like this. Especially not people like her. "Why are you really doing this? Is it just because I helped Sophie?" Christopher's expression softened slightly. "My daughter lost her mother 3 years ago. Cancer. It was sudden and devastating, and Sophie has struggled with anxiety ever since. We moved back to New York last month for a fresh start, and it's been difficult for her. When she went missing, even for those few hours, it was the worst moment of my life since losing my wife." His voice was steady, but Rachel could hear the emotion underneath. "You not only kept her safe, but you sacrificed something important to do it. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Rachel felt tears prickling at her eyes. She thought about her tiny apartment, her father's medical bills, the years of struggle and uncertainty. She thought about how one act of kindness had somehow led her here, to an opportunity she'd never imagined possible. "When would I start?" she asked. Christopher smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "How about Monday? That gives you a few days to prepare. Jennifer will handle all the paperwork and onboarding details." He stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to Sterling Industries, Rachel." She shook his hand, still half convinced she was dreaming. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I won't let you down. I know you won't." "And Rachel, Sophie asked about you. She wanted to know if the nice lady was okay. Would you be comfortable if she visited the office sometime? She'd like to thank you properly." "I'd love that," Rachel said, and meant it. As she left the office, her head spinning with disbelief and joy, Rachel caught a glimpse of a framed photo on Christopher's desk. Him and Sophie at a beach somewhere, both laughing, looking happy despite their loss. She realized then that this job wasn't just about her anymore. She was stepping into a life, a family that had survived tragedy and was rebuilding. And somehow, she'd become a small part of that story. Walking out of Sterling Tower that afternoon, Rachel felt like she was floating. She called her father first, hearing the relief and pride in his voice when she told him about the job. Then she called her best friend, who screamed so loud Rachel had to hold the phone away from her ear. But as she rode the subway home, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Things that seemed too perfect often came with complications. She'd been hired because of her character, yes, but she was also stepping into a world she knew nothing about, a world of wealth and power and expectations she might not be able to meet. She pushed the doubt away. She'd spent 5 years fighting for every opportunity. She wasn't going to sabotage this one with fear. What Rachel didn't know, as she gazed out the subway window at the passing city, was that her connection to Christopher Sterling would grow far more complex than either of them anticipated, and that the simple act of helping a lost child would set in motion events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about loyalty, ambition, and the thin line between professional and personal boundaries. Rachel's first month at Sterling Industries passed in a whirlwind of learning and adjustment. The work was demanding, managing Christopher's complex schedule, coordinating with department heads, preparing briefing documents for board meetings, but she threw herself into it with determination. She arrived early, stayed late, and spent her evenings studying the company's operations until she could speak fluently about their various divisions and initiatives. Christopher was a demanding boss, but fair. He expected excellence but also recognized effort. More surprisingly, he was kind in small, unexpected ways. When he noticed Rachel skipping lunch to finish a project, he had food delivered to her desk. When she mentioned her father's upcoming surgery, he quietly arranged for Sterling Industries' medical consultant to review the case and recommend the best specialists. Sophie visited the office twice in that first month, always lighting up when she saw Rachel. They developed an easy rapport, and Rachel found herself looking forward to these visits. Sophie would tell her about school, her new friends, the book she was reading. Rachel listened with genuine interest, remembering what it felt like to be young and trying to find your place in the world. But it was during the second month that things began to shift in ways Rachel hadn't anticipated. It started small. Christopher began asking Rachel to stay for dinner meetings, saying he valued her insights on the people they were dealing with. Then he invited her to a charity gala, explaining he needed someone there who could help him remember names and background details. Rachel told herself it was just part of her job, even as she noticed the way other employees watched them with curious expressions. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Rachel had never felt more out of place. Her dress, the nicest thing she owned, looked shabby next to the designer gowns around her. But Christopher stayed close to her side throughout the evening, introducing her to everyone as his invaluable assistant, his words carrying a warmth that felt like more than professional courtesy. "You look uncomfortable," he said quietly, as they stood near a marble sculpture, temporarily alone. "I just don't belong in places like this," Rachel admitted. "All these people with their old money and connections. I'm a girl from small-town Ohio who served coffee 3 months ago. And that's exactly why I wanted you here tonight. Everyone else in this room was born into privilege. They've never had to fight for anything. You have perspective they lack, Rachel. Value they can't comprehend." He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Don't ever apologize for where you came from." It was in that moment, surrounded by priceless art and Manhattan's elite, that Rachel realized she was developing feelings for Christopher Sterling. Real feelings that had nothing to do with his wealth or position and everything to do with the man she'd gotten to know. Intelligent, passionate about his work, devoted to his daughter, and carrying grief he rarely let show. She pushed the feelings down, horrified at herself. He was her boss. He was a billionaire. He was still mourning his wife, and she was just his assistant, someone he'd hired out of gratitude. Nothing more. But the feelings wouldn't stay buried. A week later, Rachel was working late in her office adjacent to Christopher's when she heard him on a phone call. His door was slightly ajar, and his voice carried through. "I understand your concerns, Victoria. But my decision is final. Sophie is happy here. We're not moving back to London. No, it's not about the company's European operations. It's about giving my daughter stability. That's not fair. You know how much Margaret meant to me. This has nothing to do with moving on. It's about..." He paused. "I don't need to explain myself to you. Goodbye." Rachel heard something crash, and she hurried to his door. Christopher was standing by his window, a glass shattered on the floor near his desk, his shoulders tense with frustration. "I'm sorry," Rachel said softly. "I heard the crash. Are you all right?" He turned, and she saw raw emotion on his face: anger, pain, exhaustion. "My late wife's sister," he said bitterly. "She thinks she has a say in how I raise Sophie. She thinks I'm making mistakes, that we should be in London near Margaret's family. She doesn't understand that sometimes you have to leave everything behind to heal." Rachel moved to clean up the broken glass, but Christopher stopped her. "Leave it. I'll call maintenance." "Talk to me," Rachel said instead, surprising herself. "What happened?" And he did. For the next hour, Christopher talked about his wife, how they'd met in graduate school, built the company together, dreamed of the future. He talked about watching her slip away, about the helplessness and rage. He talked about Sophie's nightmares, about moving back to New York, hoping a fresh start would help them both breathe again. Rachel listened without judgment, offering only presence and understanding. When he finally fell silent, she spoke quietly. "You're doing the right thing. Sophie is thriving. I see it every time she visits. She's finding her confidence again." "Because of you, in part," Christopher said. "She trusts you. She talks about you at home. You've become important to her. She's important to me, too." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Rachel felt the air change, felt the moment stretch and deepen. Christopher took a step toward her. "Rachel, I need to tell you something." His desk phone rang, shattering the moment. Christopher looked at it in frustration, then at Rachel with something like regret. "I'm sorry. I have to take this. It's Tokyo." Rachel nodded and slipped out of his office, her heart pounding. She gathered her things quickly and left the building, needing air and space to think. The next morning, there was an envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note from Christopher. "Thank you for listening last night. I haven't been able to talk about Margaret with anyone in a long time. Your kindness means more than you know. See." Rachel read it 3 times, analyzing every word, before carefully folding it and putting it in her purse. The following week brought a new complication. A woman named Diane Rothschild, an elegant blonde in her 40s, began appearing at the office regularly. Rachel learned from office gossip that Diane was a prominent art dealer, a family friend of the Sterlings, and that she'd been close to Christopher's late wife. The whispers suggested that several board members were encouraging Christopher to pursue a relationship with Diane, someone from their world, someone appropriate. Rachel watched as Diane found excuses to visit Christopher's office, staying for long lunches, touching his arm in casual but possessive ways. Christopher was polite but distant, and Rachel couldn't tell if he was interested or just being courteous. "Who's the new woman hanging around Christopher?" Sophie asked one afternoon when she visited after school. She was sitting at Rachel's desk, drawing in a notebook. "Her name is Diane. She's a friend of your dad's." Sophie wrinkled her nose. "She's fake. She smiles too much and asks me questions like she's reading from a script. Not like you. You're real." Rachel smiled despite her churning emotions. "Sometimes adults are awkward around kids, sweetheart. Maybe give her a chance. Do you like her?" The question was innocent, but it hit Rachel hard. "I don't really know her." Sophie looked at her seriously, with wisdom beyond her years. "I think Dad likes you better. He's happier when you're around." Before Rachel could respond, Christopher appeared in the doorway. "Sophie, stop bothering Rachel. She has work to do." "I'm not bothering her. We're friends." "It's fine," Rachel assured him. "We were just chatting." Christopher's expression softened as he looked at the two of them together. His daughter and the woman who'd saved her, now both integral to his daily life. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something, Rachel. There's a company retreat next weekend in the Hamptons. Executive team and key staff. I'd like you to attend. Sophie will be there too. I hired activities coordinators for the younger guests." It was phrased as a request, but Rachel knew it was really an expectation. "Of course. I'll make sure everything is organized. It's already organized. I want you there as a guest, not just staff. You've earned that." He paused. "Diane will be there as well. She's been helpful with some art acquisitions for the new office building." Rachel felt her stomach drop, but she kept her expression neutral. "That sounds wonderful. Thank you for including me." That night, lying in her apartment, Rachel forced herself to face the truth. She was falling in love with Christopher Sterling, and it was the most foolish thing she'd ever done. He was grieving, wealthy beyond comprehension, and possibly interested in a woman who actually belonged in his world. Rachel was his employee, someone he'd hired out of gratitude, and anything beyond that was her own fantasy. She decided then that she needed to protect herself. At the retreat, she would be professional and friendly, but maintain boundaries. She would support Christopher as his assistant, and be kind to Sophie as her friend, but she would not let herself hope for anything more. It was a good plan, a sensible plan. But Rachel had no idea that the retreat would bring revelations that would shatter her understanding of everything. About Christopher's past, about why he'd really hired her, and about secrets that Diane Rothschild was determined to expose, no matter who got hurt in the process. The Sterling estate in the Hamptons was breathtaking. A sprawling compound overlooking the ocean, with manicured lawns and a private beach. Rachel arrived Friday evening with the other staff members, trying not to gawk at the casual display of wealth surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers hung in the foyer, original paintings lined the walls, and the guest rooms were larger than her entire apartment. Sophie found Rachel immediately, grabbing her hand and dragging her down to the beach where a bonfire was already blazing. "I'm so glad you're here. Dad's been stressed all week, but he always relaxes when you're around." Rachel spotted Christopher near the fire, talking with several executives. He caught her eye and smiled, a genuine expression that made her heart skip, despite her resolution to maintain distance. Diane stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm, and Rachel forced herself to look away. The evening passed pleasantly enough. Dinner was served on the terrace overlooking the ocean, and Rachel found herself seated between the CFO and the head of marketing, both of whom treated her with respect that still surprised her. She was no longer just an assistant. She'd proven herself valuable, and people had noticed. After dinner, Sophie convinced Rachel to walk along the beach with her. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Can I tell you a secret?" Sophie asked, as they walked barefoot in the sand. "Of course. I heard Diane talking to her friend on the phone yesterday. She was at our house for dinner, and I was supposed to be in bed, but I came downstairs for water. She said she's going to make Dad fall in love with her because it would be advantageous for her gallery to have direct access to his wealth and connections." Sophie's voice was small. "That means she doesn't really like him, right?" "She just wants his money?" Rachel's heart clenched. "Sophie, adults are complicated. Maybe you misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand. I'm not a baby." Sophie looked up at her with those serious blue eyes. "I wish Dad would marry someone who actually cares about him. Someone like you." "Sophie," Rachel began, but the girl was already running ahead, chasing seagulls. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She stood on her room's balcony, watching the moonlight on the water, thinking about Sophie's words and trying to untangle her own confused feelings. A knock on her door startled her. Christopher stood in the hallway, still dressed in his dinner clothes but with his tie loosened. "I saw your light on. Can we talk?" Rachel's pulse quickened. "Of course. Come in." He entered but seemed uncertain, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was nervous. "I need to be honest with you about something. About why I really hired you." Rachel felt ice flood her veins. "What do you mean?" "When I researched you after you helped Sophie, I didn't just find out about your work history and education. I found out about your father's medical situation, about how much you sacrificed to help your family. I saw someone who understood what it meant to put others first, even at great personal cost." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "But there was something else. My wife, Margaret, she was obsessed with kindness. She always said that in a world of calculated moves and strategic relationships, genuine kindness was revolutionary. When she was dying, she made me promise something." "What?" Rachel whispered. She said, "Don't let Sophie grow up thinking everyone has ulterior motives. Show her there are still good people in the world. And Christopher, don't close yourself off. When you meet someone who reminds you that goodness exists, don't let them go because you're afraid." His voice cracked slightly. "When you sacrificed your interview to help Sophie, when you didn't even ask for recognition or reward, I knew. You were exactly the kind of person Margaret wanted in our lives." Rachel's mind reeled. "So, you hired me because of your wife's dying wish?" I hired you because you deserved the opportunity, and because I needed someone with genuine character on my team. But I'd be lying if I said Margaret's words weren't in my mind. He stepped closer. What I didn't anticipate was how important you'd become to both of us. How Sophie lights up when you're around. How I find myself wanting to share things with you that I haven't told anyone else. How I look for excuses to work late just so we can talk. Rachel's breath caught. Christopher, I'm your employee. You're my boss. This is complicated. Inappropriate, maybe. I know. He looked at her with raw honesty. But I can't stop thinking about you, Rachel, and I hope, you feel something too. Before Rachel could respond, another knock sounded on the door. Christopher moved quickly to open it, and Sophie burst in, tears streaming down her face. Dad, come quick. Diane is in your study with some man and they're looking at Mom's things, the things you keep in the locked cabinet. Christopher's expression hardened instantly. Stay here with Rachel, he told Sophie, then strode out. Rachel held the crying girl, her mind racing. It's okay, sweetheart. Your dad will handle it. 20 minutes later, Christopher returned, his face tight with controlled fury. Diane apparently thought this would be a good opportunity to help me move on, by inviting an estate appraiser to evaluate Margaret's jewelry collection. She had one of the staff unlock the cabinet. His voice was ice. I've asked her to leave, immediately. Sophie clutched Rachel's hand. I told you she was fake. Christopher knelt down to his daughter's level. You were right, and I should have listened to you. I'm sorry. He looked at Rachel over Sophie's head. Can we finish our conversation tomorrow? I need to get Sophie settled. Rachel nodded, her emotions a chaotic swirl. The next morning brought unexpected clarity. Rachel woke early and walked on the beach, trying to process everything. Christopher had feelings for her, real feelings. But could she really cross that line? Could they navigate the complexity of their professional relationship, the power imbalance, the scrutiny they'd face? She found Christopher already on the beach, throwing stones into the surf. Couldn't sleep either, he asked as she approached. Too much to think about. Rachel stood beside him. Christopher, I need to be honest too. I have feelings for you. Real feelings that have nothing to do with your money or position and everything to do with who you are. Brilliant, dedicated, kind when you think no one's watching. But I'm terrified. Of what? Of losing my job if this doesn't work out. Of people thinking I'm just another woman after your wealth. Of hurting Sophie if we try this and it fails. Of not being enough for your world. The words poured out. I'm not Diane. I'm not from your background. I still have student loans and buy my clothes on sale and sometimes eat cereal for dinner because it's all I can afford even with this amazing salary. Christopher turned to face her fully. Rachel Morgan, you are worth 1,000 Dianes. You're real, you're genuine, and you care about people. Not what they can do for you, but who they actually are. That's rarer than any jewel in Margaret's collection. He took her hands. I can't promise this won't be complicated. I can't promise people won't judge or gossip. But I can promise I'll fight for this if you're willing to try. We'll figure out the professional boundaries. Maybe you transition to another department. Maybe we create a new role. I don't have all the answers, but I know I don't want to lose you. What about Sophie? Sophie adores you. She's been not so subtly suggesting I should marry Miss Rachel for the past month. Rachel laughed through sudden tears. She has? Constantly. Apparently, you're the only adult she knows who treats her like a person instead of an accessory. Christopher smiled. Last week she told me you'd be a much better choice than that fake museum lady. They stood in the morning sun, the ocean stretching endlessly before them, both taking a leap into uncertain territory. Rachel thought about the scared girl she'd found crying on a Manhattan sidewalk 3 months ago, about the job interview she'd sacrificed, about how one moment of simple human kindness had led her here. Okay, she whispered. Let's try. Christopher pulled her close, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. 6 months later, Rachel stood in a different office at Sterling Industries, the director of Community Outreach Office, a position Christopher had created specifically for her talents. She oversaw charitable initiatives, employee volunteer programs, and partnerships with local organizations. It was meaningful work that let her help people while still being part of the company. The transition had raised some eyebrows, but Christopher had been transparent with the board about their relationship, and Rachel had proven her worth through results. The community programs she'd developed had generated positive press and improved employee morale. Sophie bounded into the office after school, dropping her backpack. "Miss Chen says I need someone to talk to Career Day about interesting jobs. Will you come, please?" "I'd be honored," Rachel said, hugging the girl who'd changed her life. Christopher appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. "Ready to go home, ladies? Home." Rachel still marveled at that word. She'd moved into the Sterling townhouse 2 months ago, slowly integrating into their life while maintaining her own identity. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments when she felt out of place at charity galas or family gatherings with Christopher's wealthy relatives. But Christopher and Sophie made her feel like she belonged, and that was enough. "I heard from the hospital today," Rachel said as they walked to the car. "Dad's surgery was successful. Full recovery expected." "That's wonderful," Christopher said warmly. He'd insisted on covering the medical expenses, though Rachel had fought him on it. Eventually, she'd accepted it as a gift. Not because she needed his money, but because she was learning that letting people help you was its own kind of strength. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, Rachel and Christopher sat on the terrace overlooking the city. The lights of Manhattan sparkled like stars, and Rachel thought about how far she'd come from that coffee shop on Fifth Avenue. "What are you thinking about?" Christopher asked, pulling her close. "About how strange life is, how one decision, one moment of choosing kindness over opportunity, can change everything. You lost a job opportunity for helping a girl," Christopher said softly, "but you gained so much more." Rachel smiled. "I gained everything." And as they sat together watching the city lights, Rachel understood that the greatest opportunities in life often come disguised as sacrifices, and that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you exactly where you were meant to be. She'd walked past her interview for a little girl in tears, never imagining that simple act of compassion would give her not just a job, but a family, a purpose, and a love she'd never dared to dream of. Sophie had been right all along. Some things really were meant to be.